In this parallel world, humans already possess interstellar migration technology, yet wars on Earth still continue. Several countries have surprisingly formed a united army to jointly attack Japan, because they developed the conceptual weapon, Object, which changes warfare. This spherical iron ball has armor impenetrable even by nuclear bombs, and firepower capable of destroying the Pacific Fleet. However, the appearance of a commoner in the United Army will completely change Object's dominance on the battlefield. Quentor joined the army to become rich, aspiring to be an object designer. His friend Hevia, a noble from the kingdom, also chose to enlist in order to gain sufficient merit. The two couldn't help but marvel at the overwhelming power of object mechas. Even the army commander could only hide in a room during battles, praying for victory. That day, as usual, he went to the logistics department to learn. His task was to maintain the emergency escape device, but this fool accidentally hit the seatbelt button, causing the seat's occupant, a girl, to turn red-faced from the tightening strap. The engineer, Ayami, saw this and immediately asked Quentor to hold the seatbelt while she looked for something to cut it with. Hesitant, because holding the seatbelt meant touching the girl's chest, Quentor didn't want to take advantage of the situation. As Quentor struggled to decide, the girl could no longer bear it and pressed the seat eject button herself. Through this incident, Quentor learned her name was Melinda. Just when Quentor thought he would safely continue his studies at the base, disaster struck. Their own mecha was destroyed by the enemy, who refused to accept surrender and planned a massacre. This event would pivot Quentor's fate. That night, the enemy suddenly launched a night raid on our base. Fortunately, we detected the attack in time and promptly deployed our first-generation mechs to counter it. Despite matching firepower, our mechs were outdated compared to the enemy's second-generation mechs, which were specialized for icy terrains and significantly superior in performance. Using their speed advantage, the enemy flanked and destroyed our mechs. At the moment of destruction, our forces raised the white flag. Unexpectedly, the enemy did not accept our surrender, but instead started a massacre. Just as Quentor was about to be shelled, the enemy suddenly retreated. It turned out they had intercepted a distress signal from one of our mech pilots, and capturing the pilot was deemed more critical than continuing the slaughter. Upon hearing the news, Quentor tried to rush to the rescue but was stopped by his superior. She, in grief and anger, told him that the distress signal was intentionally sent to buy time for the main forces to escape. She urged him not to waste her efforts. However, the thought of Melinda's self-sacrifice troubled Quentor. The idea that he, as a man, had to rely on a woman's sacrifice to survive was deeply unsettling to him. So, despite trembling with fear, he decided to rescue Melinda. However, as it was his first time on the battlefield, he was reluctant to kill. That changed when he heard the enemy say they planned to tie the pilot to a mech and drag her along, and if she was still alive, to take her to the interrogation room for repeated assaults. The enemy's brutal words shifted Quentor's mindset. They were nothing but beasts to him now. He then shot one enemy in the head, and with Melinda's help, successfully eliminated the rest. Unexpectedly, the enemy managed a final effort and fired a grenade at Quentor. Just in time, his friend Hevia rushed from behind and saved his life. Although they rescued Melinda, the crisis was not over as the enemy's mechs were already en route. They had to quickly hide. Fortunately, Quentor, being a sapper, carried explosives with him. Hevia threw the explosives at the entrance, and the three of them slid inside. There, Quentor accidentally triggered his lucky pervert skill. While it was a relief, escaping was more crucial. When they reached the end of the cave, Hevia detonated the explosives, causing the enemies outside to lose their target and allowing them to narrowly escape. But Quentor did not plan on returning yet. The area had gathered students studying mech design, analysts seeking strategies, and mech pilots. Hence, Quentor planned to find the enemy's weakness and destroy their mechs. This man is incredible. Not only did he bravely infiltrate the enemy headquarters, but he also seized the detonator from their encirclement and even managed to destroy a mech with his bare hands. That day, Quentor decided to sneak into the enemy base to sabotage the spare parts of their mechs, aiming to stop the enemy from pursuing our retreating forces. However, he was overwhelmed by the vast array of parts in the enemy's maintenance warehouse and didn't know where to start. Meanwhile, Melinda, who was keeping watch outside, wanted to inform Quentor that the enemy mechs were returning, but using the radio would surely alert the enemy to intercept the message. So, to protect Quenther, she decided to risk drawing the enemy's attention to herself. On the other hand, the persistent Quenther luckily found the enemy mech's design manual. With his strong learning abilities, he identified a vulnerability in the enemy mechs. He then tampered with a specific part and rigged a bomb on a container during his retreat. But midway, he discovered that Melinda had been captured. Consequently, he convinced Havia to use the radio to call for reinforcements from our army, which unfortunately revealed their position and led to their capture by the enemy. Fortunately, the enemy leader was foolish, not killing them on the spot, but instead wanting to blast them to smithereens with a mech. This gave Quenther an opportunity. As the repaired mech emerged, he quickly tackled the enemy and seized the detonator. The enemy was taken aback. After regaining composure, they mocked Quenther's ignorance, scoffing that their prized weapon could never be damaged by a mere explosion. Seeing the enemy's foolishness, Quenther explained, "To prevent mechs from being captured, they are all equipped with self-destruct devices. Normally, these won't activate under sensor surveillance, but if the sensors are removed and an internal explosion occurs, the system misjudges and initiates the self-destruct sequence." After the mech exploded surprisingly, both parties near the blast survived. Quenther quickly detonated the bomb in the container, hoping to escape, but the enemy blocked his path. At that critical moment, a gunshot rang out, and the enemy leader was killed. It turned out that the commander had arrived with reinforcements and bombarded the enemy's position. Back home, Quenther and Havia changed into suits to receive national honors. The commander also attended in a striking kimono, and Melinda dressed up charmingly, making Quenther blush. At the award ceremony, Quenther was granted access to the national database, and Havia was set to return home and inherit a title. Just when they thought they were winners in life, they were unexpectedly deployed to another battlefield. Even their next location had been decided, making them wonder if their promotions were just to keep them content as cannon fodder. If asked to destroy a steel monster equipped with 3 power reactors using only your hands, could you do it? The answer is no. But this man did. That day, he flew by helicopter to the Strait of Gibraltar. The commander ordered them there to stop an enemy mech invasion of the Mediterranean. Hearing this, Havia grimaced and said, "That's a steel monster with 3 power reactors. They're sending us to our deaths." However, he added that being stepped on by long legs might just give him the motivation. After reprimanding Havia, the commander stated that our military had laid a large minefield in the sea, and our mechs would also join the battle. You just need to operate in secret. After reaching the frontline base, Quenther and Havia were speechless. Over 30 bases on the sea were nearly destroyed by the enemy, and the supposed minefield in the water did little to trouble or even delay them. The Allied mechs that were promised to join the fight were nowhere to be seen. Had they not decided to jump into the sea, they might have been blown to bits. Luckily, there were floating debris on the surface, preventing them from drowning. Just as they thought they were safe, an enemy mech approached. In a critical moment, Quenther leapt onto a lifeboat, opened a hidden compartment, took out 3 diving goggles, and instructed his comrades to dive into the sea to avoid the mech's collision. Unfortunately, Quenther got caught in the water currents created by the mech, and his foot was tangled in a fishing net. If he didn't free himself quickly, an unexploded mine could detonate and obliterate him. At the last second, Havia arrived to untangle the net, and together they managed to sneak inside the mech. Although they infiltrated the mech, they didn't know how to destroy it. With no other choice, they began planting bombs on the fuel tank while searching for vulnerabilities, all while engaging in fierce combat with any enemy soldiers they encountered. Just then, Allied mechs arrived at the battlefield, causing the enemy to retreat into their cockpit. However, this put Quenther in danger as Melinda, unaware of his presence, might accidentally target him. So, Quenther quickly contacted Melinda, instructing her to switch the main weapon to a laser to avoid lethal strikes. Unfortunately, due to a poor signal, she misunderstood and thought she was to use the laser on people. Luckily, Quenther and his partner reacted swiftly, nearly avoiding friendly fire. Afterward, they crawled swiftly and jumped back into the sea. Safe at last, Quenther detonated the bombs on the fuel tank, securing a victory in the battle. The best way to spice up a dull battlefield aside from playing poker is undoubtedly the presence of a beautiful woman, especially one in a mini Christmas dress with ample curves. This girl, however, who was utterly outshone in figure, was currently adjusting her new combat suit. It's worth mentioning that this bodysuit could be controlled by the sound of a whistle. Quenther's whistling made Melinda's legs go weak, but he was so engrossed in his playing that he completely missed her discomfort. He even thought Melinda needed to use the restroom. Despite being beaten up for it, Quenther didn't change his ways and ended up ignoring Melinda to chat with a beautiful woman from the enemy side, which made Melinda extremely jealous. Suddenly, the Allied forces commander issued a strike order. The troops would next head to the Oceanian military nation's hideout to strike against the enemy. Originally, this was a mismatched war since the enemy only had one 0.5 generation mech, while the Allied forces had over 20 mechs. However, the Oceanian military nation used its territorial advantage to hide its mech, forcing the Allied forces to search potential hiding spots one by one. After a barrage of bombing, the enemy was still not found, and the Allies had hit a dead end. Before moving to the next predicted location, the pilots had to rest because operating the mechs at high speeds caused their bodies to overheat. After the battle, she had to remove her pilot suit and use a cooling spray on her body. Quenther was then sent ahead to the next point to evacuate the crowd. However, upon arriving at the village, he encountered Oceanian troops collecting protection money. Quenther did not act rashly, as they were only 2 people. Just then, an inappropriate gunshot rang out. Some fool had fired the shot, killing one of the enemy soldiers. This completely enraged the enemy, who thought the villagers had betrayed them, leading them to massacre the villagers. A man fired just one shot and caused the death of an entire village of 108 people. After the incident, he felt no guilt. Instead, he was self-satisfied, unaware that his action would spark a massacre. Hours earlier, a man hidden in the darkness used a sniper rifle to kill a soldier collecting protection money. Unfortunately, the villagers were blamed for this act, leading to their slaughter by the enraged enemy troops. Fortunately, the Allied forces arrived in time to subdue the frenzied enemy soldiers. The war correspondent who fired the shot didn't think he did anything wrong and was actually pleased with himself, believing he had played a major role in wiping out an enemy battalion. It wasn't until his superior showed him a photo of a child he had killed and explained that because of his actions, a larger massacre was imminent, that he understood the gravity of his mistake. The battalion he helped eliminate was the Oceanian military's massacre squad, tasked with killing civilians in front of the media to provoke international outrage and force the Allied troops to withdraw. With the loss of their massacre squad, the Oceanian military was likely to execute a larger, unphotographed slaughter using war mechs. The chilling words from his superior made the reporter feel as if he had fallen into an ice pit. To find the hidden location of the Oceanian military mechs as soon as possible, Quenther deduced 3 potential hideouts based on available intelligence. At that moment, military high command reported they had located the mechs. This puzzled Quenther. The enemy's mechs had been well concealed until now, so why were they suddenly exposed? Suddenly, Quenther thought of the prototype reactor used in mech construction for testing. If his reasoning was correct, the detected reaction was likely a trap set by the enemy to explode the reactor and destroy any approaching mechs. However, these were just Quenther's speculations without solid evidence, so he couldn't stop the military's actions. Therefore, he decided to head to the location with the weaker reaction, because if he could verify this location as genuine, the enemy's scheme would collapse on its own. Quenther shared his theory with the military, advising them to keep their mechs at a distance and attack from afar. He then made a bet with his superior. If the military's location was correct, they could confine him. If his location was correct, they should reward them well. This man is incredible. He once again destroyed with his bare hands a mech that not even a nuclear bomb could damage. Just recently, after Quenther located the enemy mech's hiding spot, he immediately requested reinforcements from the Allied forces. Unexpectedly, the Supreme Commander of the Allied forces, claiming Quenther was delusional, denied military support. It turned out he wanted to return to a state where mechs could dominate the battlefield, and thus he wanted Quenther eliminated from the scene. Upon learning he was abandoned, Quenther was not disheartened. He decided to take out the mech in front of him first, then go back and settle the score with the commander. Just then, The mech spotted them. Fortunately, its shot missed, giving Quenther a chance to escape. He fired a missile into a sewage pool and used the blind spot created by the sewage to flee into a maintenance warehouse. He expected to encounter soldiers guarding it, but found no one, only a burnt smell. It turned out the soldiers had been scorched. He then began to investigate the cause. Noticing scattered cables and the mech's severed power line on the ground, he realized what had happened. Typically, mechs have a function to discharge excess electricity externally, but this function was broken. Thus, when it discharged, it killed the soldiers. This meant that charging the mech again would cause it to self-destruct. Quenther quickly started the charger, plugged it in, and had Havia drag the power cable outside. Just then, the mech sensed the high-energy reaction and fired its cannons. Upon returning to the warehouse, Havia found that not only was Quenther seriously injured, but he also couldn't escape. To ensure both their survival, Havia decided to risk it all to see if the mech would explode first or if he could destroy it. However, the forklift overturned midway because the electric cable wasn't long enough. Fortunately, the short cable spared Havia's life. But it wasn't time to relax yet, as they would surely die if they didn't come up with a plan soon. In a critical moment, Quenther spotted a water tower, sparking an idea. He set up a rocket launcher and fired a missile into the water channel. Anyone who knows physics understands that water conducts electricity, so Quenther's intention was clear. This man, slower than a turtle at loading, suddenly burst into rapid hand movements after watching an adult film, impressing anyone who saw. However, the awkward moment came when his fiancée walked in on him halfway through. Amidst the embarrassment, their attractive superior officer entered and assigned them a new mission. This time, they were to locate anti-aircraft missiles deployed by terrorists in the snowy expanses of Antarctica. As they explored, however, they were ambushed by terrorists. Observing through a scope, they saw 8 enemies, 4 times their number. Escaping was not an option, so Quenther and his companion chose to fight. In the midst of the fierce battle, a group of adorable baby penguins entered the battlefield, causing both sides to stop fighting and admire the cute scene momentarily. But the ceasefire was brief. Once the penguins left, the battle resumed intensely. The terrorists, now familiar with Quenther's combat abilities, prepared to encircle them. Suddenly, a bomb exploded in the center, cracking the ice beneath. The approaching terrorists fell into the vacuum created below, a trap Quenther had set for the encroaching enemies. After locating the enemy base, Quenther moved to investigate, but cannons suddenly emerged from the snow. The duo, narrowly escaping death, jumped into a trench to avoid the shelling. Yet, the danger was not over. If they didn't find a solution, they would soon be blown to pieces. An anxious Havia asked if Quenther could make the cannons fall like before, but Quenther said it was impossible this time, as the nearby ground was solid rock, making their previous tactic unfeasible. He originally wanted to use the mech to destroy the artillery, but the mountain blocked the projectile's path. Suddenly, he had a flash of insight and sent several coordinates, instructing Melinda to conduct a barrage on the targeted location. The attack didn't cause effective damage, but that was exactly what Quenther intended. His initial target was not the artillery, but the rock bed beneath it. By blasting the surface open, the rock anchors stabilizing the guns would fail. Once the cannons fired, they would collapse under their own recoil. This was Quenther's plan. After completing their mission, while resting and soaking their feet, they discovered an observation drone. By examining the data it contained, Quenther learned the true aim of the terrorists. They planned to kill a major general of a corporate army living in a lunar villa. The terrorists had hacked into communication satellites in space using the drone and intended to use the onboard laser to destroy the lunar surface's sunshade. This would doom the inhabitants of the lunar base to die in the vacuum of space. Upon hearing this, their superior officer told Quenther and the others to ignore it because the target was also someone they were supposed to eliminate. Just then, Quenther remembered that Havia's fiancée might be living there. Havia immediately made a call to confirm, and unsurprisingly, She was indeed residing there. At this moment, Quenther suggested a plan. Accidentally hit the stop button. Who wouldn't want a glamorous female boss who can pole dance? After enjoying the pole dance, everyone immediately went into combat readiness. The mission was to annihilate an accelerator tycoon who had invaded the border. However, before the attack, Quenther and Melinda had a disagreement. Quenther then made a bet with her. If the metal reaction in the hillside area was from artillery, not iron ore, he would make a special pudding shaped like Melinda's breasts. As expected, shortly after they set off, they were bombarded by artillery fire. Angered by the lost bet, Melinda fired a plasma cannon, leveling the opposite hilltop. After Quenther and the others successfully landed on the island, they immediately began setting up a temporary command post. Just then, the enemy fired a powerful railgun from a great distance, killing the temporary commander and crippling the standby mechs, as well as destroying the command post. Stunned by the blast, Quenther woke up to find his ankle sprained. At that moment, the temporary commander's troops sent an infuriating battle plan. They planned to blow up a dam to flood the enemy's mechs, completely disregarding the safety of hundreds of thousands of civilians downstream. Enraged, Quenther and Hyvia decided to split up. Hyvia would stop the friendly forces from destroying the dam, while Quenther would go after the enemy mechs. But first, they needed to pinpoint the enemy mech's exact location to set up Melinda for an ambush. Assisted by his superior, Quenther made his way to a fork in the valley to wait for the enemy mechs to appear. On the other side, as Hyvia was leaving, he couldn't resist backstabbing Quenther by telling Melinda that Quenther was getting cozy with their superior. As soon as he said this, a jealous Melinda canceled her standby mode. Meanwhile, Quenther, who was waiting for the enemy mech to appear, initially wanted to locate it by the sound of its drive. However, Melinda's arrival mixed up the sounds, making it impossible for him to pinpoint the enemy mech's position. Faced with 3 possible routes, Quenther decided to take a risky move. If they split into 2 groups, they could certainly determine the movement route of the enemy mech. However, the superior officer disagreed with the plan. So Quenther found an excuse to distract the officer, and then took the chance to roll down the hillside. The superior was left speechless by his bold move and decided to give him a severe scolding later. At the same time, Melinda, having reached the designated position and unable to contact Quenther, became jealous again. Unfortunately for Quenther, as he rolled down, he not only sprained his other ankle but also broke his communicator and even encountered the enemy mech on that route. Unable to make contact, Quenther decided to take a gamble. He pulled out a handgun and rhythmically shot at the enemy mech. Indeed, he was signaling. At that moment, Melinda deciphered the signals and pinpointed the exact location of the enemy mech. She destroyed the enemy machine just as Quenther was about to be hit by artillery fire. However, Quenther, who barely survived, was then subjected to his superior's idea of a reward. When you encounter countless mutant ants, do not act foolishly like this person, randomly spraying insecticide. The correct approach should be as follows. First, take out all the insecticide you have, then throw it all into the swarm of ants, and then throw a tied-up bomb into the air to detonate it. This will use the blast wave to blow the wasted smoke downwards, effectively exterminating the mutant ants. As expected, hundreds of thousands of ants were suffocated to death. Afterwards, the 2 survivors, having escaped danger, prepared to continue their assassination mission. At this moment, the superior officer urgently called. She anxiously informed the assassination squad that they must eliminate the renegade tycoon Thacker within 2 hours. It turns out the superior had received intelligence that Thacker was planning to flee to the Information Alliance, prompting the technology exporting capital enterprises to decide on a military intervention. If Thacker is not eliminated within 2 hours, it could lead to a 3-way battle, turning Quenther's location into the most terrifying battlefield. Just then, a sudden explosion was heard nearby, followed by the emergence of an enemy high-powered railgun from underground. Seeing that the railgun was about to fire, Quenther immediately called Melinda to shoot first. However, at that moment, Quenther realized something was amiss. Such a powerful railgun could not possibly be mounted on the ground. It was a trap, and an experimental reactor might be buried underneath. Quenther immediately instructed Melinda to stop advancing. Although Melinda avoided disaster, the mech's legs were destroyed by the blast, causing the system to misjudge and nearly eject the pilot. As Quenther was heading to the landing spot to meet Melinda, a flash of light caught his attention. He picked up binoculars and saw that an iron net had been placed over the ejection port. If Melinda had ejected, she would have been minced. In the nick of time, Quenther threw a bomb that destroyed the iron net, successfully saving Melinda. However, the crisis was not over. Unexpectedly, Thacker, in an attempt to shoot Melinda, risked revealing himself. Fortunately, Quenther quickly noticed and threw an unarmed bomb to scare Thacker away. By the time Thacker realized what was happening, Melinda had already disappeared. Furious, Thacker turned his anger towards Quenther, but his shooting was terrible. After firing many bullets, he only hit Quenther's shoulder. Furthermore, due to his cowardice, Thacker was once again frightened by Quenther, hiding right where Quenther expected. By the time he realized his mistake, it was already too late. To gain leverage over her subordinates, the icy female boss took advantage of her position by conducting a sudden raid on their rooms for pornography. Surprisingly, the variety of pornographic magazines was quite extensive, featuring not only 36 D-photo collections, but also special editions on black stockings and high heels, and even bondage role-playing. To break down her subordinates' psychological defenses, the boss deliberately flipped through the magazines in front of them. Quenther and Havia quickly begged for mercy. Seeing her objective achieved, she wasted no more words and took them directly to the billiards room, where she issued missions while playing pool. Her hometown had a peculiar custom. Anyone who pockets the cue ball must allow the next player to kick their behind. She was particularly keen to experience kicking someone else's behind. The officer explained that the mission was to expel the Information Alliance troops stationed around our forces. The mech wreckage scattered across Alaska contained military secrets, and as the victors, they had the right to retrieve them. However, the Information Alliance wanted a share and had even built antenna facilities nearby. Thus, the mission was to destroy the enemy's decoding devices. Upon hearing this, Quenther immediately refused, arguing that it was effectively a suicide mission given the danger at the front lines. However, the officer clarified that their role was simply to carry out the demolition. The rest would be handled by our mechs. As she finished speaking, the cue ball rolled into a pocket. Despite some dissatisfaction, the officer chose to abide by the game's rules. Forced to accept the mission, Quenther and Havia arrived in the snowy mountains of Alaska, where they stuffed bombs into the rock walls and detonated them from a distance. This blocked the enemy's advance route. At the same time, their mech faced off against the enemy mech. Before the battle began, the enemy pilot provoked them by mocking Melinda's figure and attempting to take Quenther away. Surprisingly, the two pilots, fighting over a man, ended up in a draw, both destroying each other's main cannons, rendering them unable to continue the fight. They both retreated rapidly to their bases to repair their main cannons, as the winner of the war would be whoever completed the repairs first. Quenther and Havia laughed, knowing they had already blocked the enemy's retreat route, so victory seemed certain. However, an unexpected twist occurred. The enemy did not move towards their repair base, but met up with a nearby mobile unit instead. The enemy had secretly transported their main cannon by manpower, significantly saving on repair time. Realizing the severity of the situation, Quenther quickly moved to intercept the enemy mech at a critical pass, launching missiles as a decoy while he jumped onto the enemy mech to find a way to delay the repairs. However, his communications with Havia were intercepted, leading to them being bombarded from all directions. Surviving this was nearly miraculous. But Quenther not only survived but also took advantage of the enemy changing their main cannon to sneak into the cockpit and hold the pilot at knife point. Yet, he was shocked when he saw the pilot. The enemy pilot, named Monica, who originally appeared to have a 39D bust size, turned out to be flat-chested, and the mature woman turned out to be a lowly. It was all an illusion created by 3D effects on the screen, shattering Quenther's fantasies. Given the situation, he had no choice but to ask Monica to close all hatches and cease all operations. But the moment Monica took her hands off the controls, Quenther was thrown aside by a powerful force. It turned out that the enemy mech was equipped with strategic AI, which could automatically attack based on preset paths and objectives, a strong asset of the Information Alliance. Since the enemy mech relied entirely on AI for operations, with the pilot only manually correcting errors detected by the AI, the mech became uncontrollable the moment Monica let go. As the mech spun and swayed, Quenther was firmly pinned against the wall. Seeing the enemy mech on the move, Melinda had to immediately move to intercept. However, with only one main cannon functional, the battle was uneven. At that moment, Melinda heard Quenther's voice through the enemy's audio system. Although Quenther tried to explain, Melinda didn't believe him. Seeing the AI predict Melinda's movements, Quenther directed her to move in a specified direction. Despite her verbal doubts, Melinda followed his instructions. During her movements, she used her main cannon to disrupt the enemy mech's operations and then melted the snow on the surrounding mech debris with her laser weapon's heat. Since Quenther was directing under the enemy's watch, Monica quickly made adjustments. As the enemy mech successfully hit Melinda's main cannon, Melinda was forced to stop. As the battle was nearing its end, the enemy mech suddenly stopped. It turned out that the provocative words directed at Melinda were actually a code meant for Hevia. After receiving the coded message, Hevia quickly located the main cannon previously destroyed by Quenther. He used a spare battery to activate the cannon's infrared sight. As Melinda led the enemy mech to the predetermined location, the AI detected potential risks and fell into disarray. Seeing that the AI was no longer functioning, Monica was forced to take manual control of the mech. However, Quenther informed her that there were bombs under her seat, which were actually fake, planted by Quenther to sow discord between Monica and the enemy commander. Monica directed her anger at Quenther, but when she learned that Quenther intended to help her escape, her desire to capture him grew even stronger. After resolving the conflict with the Information Alliance, the Legitimacy Kingdom decided to conduct a sabotage operation on Faith Organization's military mines. Quenther, as a dispatched exchange student, was not required to fight on the front lines, but was still assigned to support roles in the rear. While he was transporting supplies, he encountered a female officer, Charlotte. Since it was during combat operations, soldiers were supposed to remain in the barracks, making Quenther's presence there quite conspicuous. Consequently, Charlotte confronted him at gunpoint, demanding to know his unit and rank. When she learned that Quenther was a student, she holstered her pistol, as students were not under her jurisdiction. Upon Quenther's return to the briefing room, the commanding officer began to explain the details of the operation. According to the intelligence department, destroying the military mine would hinder the enemy's overall operations. To achieve this, the enemy's second-generation mech had to be destroyed. Although its main cannon was weak, it could hit targets at long range, with 100% accuracy. Additionally, its mobility components were airjet-based, allowing it to operate on both land and water without needing part replacements, making it a formidable opponent not suitable for direct confrontation. Therefore, the mission was to hack into the enemy's large radar facilities to disrupt the targeting assistance system of their mechs. Securing just a minute or two of confusion would allow their own mechs to take advantage of the situation and destroy the enemy. The briefing concluded, and the nighttime lightning raid officially began. Hevia led a small team to the front lines to sever the radar facility's transmission lines, while Quenther's team headed to the enemy's rear to deploy interference software on the large radar. However, just when everything was going smoothly, trouble was inevitable. There was a traitor among them. After distracting Quenther and Charlotte, he immediately pulled out a dagger and killed a teammate who was hacking into the system. He then attacked from behind, shooting at Charlotte and Quenther. But a villain who doesn't finish off his opponents is doomed to fail. Except for the first victim, whom he fatally stabbed, the other two survived because he didn't follow through, giving them a chance for revenge. Meanwhile, due to the traitor in Quenther's team, The mission to disrupt the radar failed, allowing enemy mechs to breach the frontline base. This put the troops executing Plan B in a desperate situation. Some suggested fleeing, but this was quickly dismissed as human speed could not match that of mechs. With no other options, they decided to make a last stand. However, reality was harsh. The airflow from the advancing mechs blew 2 teammates off a cliff. The 2 survivors decided to survive by infiltrating the enemy's mine. There, they encountered Quenther, also fleeing for his life. They exchanged information and discovered several suspicious points. First, this was not a military mine, but a diamond mine. Furthermore, those working there were part of an anti-war group trying to earn aid funds to help the impoverished people of the Legitimacy Kingdom. From this information, Quenther and his companions concluded that those who play conspiracies indeed have tainted hearts. The Faith organization had long wanted to eliminate the anti-war group. They hesitated because directly attacking them would only increase anti-war sentiment. So they set a trap to have someone else do their dirty work. The most sinister part was that if the anti-war group was mistakenly killed by the Legitimacy Kingdom, who had extended help to them, it would turn trust into massive hatred, a classic case of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Realizing something was off, Quenther started to run. The enemy's mechs were far superior to their own, yet there were no reports of the enemy's victory. This led to only one conclusion. The enemy was luring their mechs to this location. Quenther prayed that Melinda would not fall for the enemy's provocations. Just then, a robot suddenly burst through a wall blocking Quenther and his group's path, driven by the earlier traitor. As the saying goes, you won't die if you don't court death. This spy perfectly exemplified this. Despite having several opportunities to kill Quenther, he chose to indulge in the thrill of the chase, playing a cat-and-mouse game with him, which ultimately led to a spectacularly elaborate death. A few hours earlier, the spy had grabbed Quenther's head with his mech, intending to crush it slowly. At the last moment, a girl ran up and struck the mech's hand joint with a pickaxe, freeing Quenther. To avoid endangering the girl, Quenther lured the spy to chase him and dropped 2 explosive packs in an attempt to kill him. However, the explosives were not strong enough to penetrate the enemy's armor, forcing them to continue fleeing. Then, the enemy lifted a huge rock and threw it at Quenther. In a critical moment, Charlotte pushed Quenther out of the way, but was struck and wounded in the thigh by debris. Her injury made it difficult for her to move, so she urged Quenther to leave her and escape. However, as a man, he could not leave a woman behind. After ensuring Charlotte was safe, Quenther prepared to retaliate. They had taken refuge in a cave that was used for sorting ore, which happened to contain diamonds, the hardest material on Earth. Quenther planned to use a diamond to deliver a spectacularly fatal blow to the spy. After eliminating the spy, Quenther returned to his primary job, dismantling mechs by hand. He first used binoculars to observe the enemy, attempting to find weaknesses in their mech. Fortunately, during one of the enemy mech's jumps, Quenther inadvertently spotted a camera under its foot, giving him a breakthrough. Normally, the larger the base area for retaining compressed air in a cushion, the better. However, the enemy had forsaken this advantage. The only explanation was that to handle uneven terrain, they needed sensors to process information and prevent their own weight from crushing them upon landing. Thus, by using infrared interference to disrupt the enemy mech's judgment, Quenther could create a fatal flaw. Afterward, Charlotte was so impressed by Quenther's charm that she became his devoted fan. However, it was awkward when a pack of diamonds fell out of Quenther's pocket. Time is a merciless butcher. This short and unattractive old woman was once a beautiful young girl. Quenther initially thought she was her daughter until he learned it was actually her, which scared him into thinking he had encountered a monster. However, Ayami was not in the mood to deal with this oddity, as the Legitimacy Kingdom was currently in a civil war and her hometown was right in the conflict zone, so she was very worried about her family's safety. Meanwhile, the war was initially a one-sided crush. The rebellious nobles had only 1 mech, while the Legitimacy Kingdom had 3, plus a bug who could dismantle Gundams barehanded. With such a lineup, it was hard to lose. Yet, unexpectedly, The rebels used infantry to spread blue gas all over the battlefield, a special gas used for low-stability plasma cannons. Once ignited, it would produce destruction similar to that of a plasma cannon. They appeared weak initially, then gradually lured the enemy deeper into their position, and finally used the plasma cannon to ignite the special gas. One of the Legitimacy Kingdom's mechs had its thrusters melted by the high temperature, turning it into an immobile target. Just as the enemy was about to deliver a fatal blow, Melinda risked danger to knock her ally out of the way. Although she saved her ally, both mechs suffered varying degrees of damage. At that moment, Havia received news that the third mech was on its way. He couldn't believe that they couldn't defeat the enemy mech 3 against 1. But then he received news that the third mech was destroyed, and then they saw on the scanner that there were actually 6 enemy mechs. The situation in the war changed instantly. The rebelling nobles led an attack with 7 mechs, claiming it was a military exercise while planning to slaughter the residents of a migrant city. My clever Quenther immediately deduced that 6 of the rebel mechs were likely fakes, merely for show. As they were about to act, they were attacked by unknown assailants. Although Quenther quickly retaliated, the attackers possessed anti-tank missiles, forcing them to surrender. Surprisingly, the attackers were combat maids who called themselves the Battlefield Cleaning Service Team. Captured, Quenther's spirits lifted, seeing them as perfect tools. He decided to hire them, but they mocked him for being broke. Before the maids could finish speaking, Quenther pulled out a black box filled with 15-carat diamonds, stating it was just a deposit with 2 more payments to follow if they accepted the mission. Indeed, men backed by money do look very handsome. After successfully hiring the combat maids, they immediately pursued the rebel forces. On the way, Quenther and Havia repeatedly discussed tactics, though with little success. As he grew frustrated, one of the maids pounced, confidently stating, "As long as you can pay, even God himself can be taken down." Meanwhile, Ayami hurried to the migrant city to evacuate her family before the rebel army could massacre the town. With little time and to prevent panic, she forbade her daughter from speaking out and took the blame herself. After picking up her son-in-law, she gave him no chance to argue and drove at full speed to her granddaughter's school. However, she was still too late, as the migrant city was now within range of the enemy mechs. They could no longer escape. Just as Ayami despaired, her communicator rang. Quenther joked, "I still have much to learn from you. Losing you would hinder my dreams, so I'm coming to save you." This man is incredible. He destroyed 7 spherical mechs with his bare hands. A few hours earlier, the rebel army attacked the migrant city with 7 mechs, preparing to massacre its inhabitants. Ignoring his own safety, Quenther initiated a diversionary tactic. The Maid Brigade piloted drones towards the enemy, but they were shot down before reaching their target range. Caught without a chance to retreat, Quenther was pursued by the enemy troops and targeted by a mech. To eliminate Quenther, it fired a special gas intending to turn him into a barbecue. At the critical moment, an automatic cannon vehicle appeared and shot the gas canister back to the enemy's position. Just when Quenther thought he had escaped disaster, the enemies, in their madness, decided to sacrifice a battalion to kill him. Quenther then detonated explosives, using the blast wave to disperse the special gas. Miraculously surviving, he discovered that the enemy mech's armor had been penetrated by the automatic cannon vehicle. Astonished, he inspected the fallen armor plate, which was incredibly thick, yet surprisingly light. Undoubtedly, this was the breakthrough to defeat the enemy. He placed the armor on a terminal and used a wireless device close to the armor to send radio waves. After some calculations, he determined a penetration rate of 34.2, meaning 6 of the enemy mechs were made of special ceramic. With this conclusion, Quenther quickly devised a plan to annihilate the enemy. He exploited a bug in the strategic AI that prioritizes mech victory in emergencies, causing it to mistakenly attack its own troops. This strategy killed 2 birds with 1 stone. It not only wiped out the infantry, but also ignited the special gas on the armored vehicles, creating intense heat that melted the 6 ceramic mechs. They weren't completely destroyed, but given the icy conditions, the thermal expansion and contraction gradually ruined the mechs. The rebel leader could only watch as his inferior mechs were destroyed, infuriating him. He now wanted nothing more than to obliterate Quenther. In the nick of time, Melinda arrived. Seeing her, the leader turned to attack the supporting mech, but as he was about to fire the railgun, special gas drifted around him. This lecherous old man is a religious figure with strong international influence. However, leaders from 4 countries avoid him due to his advocacy for nonviolent non-compliance and pacifism, which disrupts their war efforts. As a result, he is bounced around like a ball, kicked from one country to another each year. This year, the unfortunate host is the Information Alliance. At the gathering place of these 4 nations, Melinda and Monica meet again. As rivals in love, they immediately start mocking each other, with Melinda adopting the posture of the victor and boasting about a gift she received from Quenther, even mimicking Monica's signature laugh. As their argument intensifies, Melinda's communication suddenly cuts off, a bad sign during such a sensitive period. The technical department quickly investigates and discovers that her mech has been hacked. The source of the virus is traced to an abandoned villa 15 kilometers away. Quenther and Havia immediately head to the source of the signal. At that moment, Charlotte informed Quenther that the cyber attack on Melinda was likely orchestrated by an escaped parliament member, aiming to sabotage the hostage exchange and trigger a world war. Although Quenther rushed to the abandoned villa, he arrived just a step too late. Melinda had been implanted with the Mirror of Truth, a cognitive intervention program. Under its influence, the hypnotized subject interprets all received information maliciously. The ruthless parliament member, to cover his tracks, handcuffed his feet to a table, planning to die with the decryption code that could remove the hypnosis. Because of the cognitive distortion, Melinda began her assault, igniting the fuse for war. If the old man dies, it could spark another world war. The only remaining solution to prevent this scenario is to eliminate the out-of-control Melinda, along with her mech. To rescue his girlfriend, this man drove a broken truck straight into a battlefield between 2 mechs. Predictably, they were blown away by the combat's shockwaves before they could get close. Havia sustained minor injuries, but Quenther was worse off. He suffered multiple fractures and a severe leg wound that hit a major artery, causing unstoppable bleeding. During surgery, his heart even stopped for a moment. Although he was revived, upon waking and learning that the state decided to destroy the uncontrollable Melinda, he ignored his injuries, got out of the hospital bed, and planned to save Melinda before the state could act. Despite the slim chances of success, he firmly believed that human-made problems could be solved with human effort. So he earnestly asked Monica for help, even kneeling to persuade her. Once Monica agreed, Quenther and his superior finalized their plan, and the rescue mission began. Monica, piloting a mech, exchanged fire with Melinda while slowly luring her to a designated spot. Just as the plan was about to succeed, an unexpected problem occurred. Melinda was just a bit away from the target location. With no other options, Quenther used himself as bait. He exploited Melinda's cognitive distortion, pleading her not to fire at him. However, due to her cognitive impairment, she misinterpreted his words as an instruction to use all firepower to obliterate the vehicle, starting a race against death. A white device flew towards the mech, dodging numerous machine gun bursts, and exploded in front of it. The released powder was sucked into the mech's barrel along with its intake, causing the barrel to self-destruct. Quenther succeeded in doing what had only a 1% chance of occurring. He destroyed the mech while safely rescuing Melinda inside.